Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Kinzel. I'm with Knowmium, and we are doing a video interview with Ruskyle Howser, who is based in Tokyo, Japan. Ruskyle, you know yourself better than I know you, so I'll let you do your own introduction.
Thank you, Bob. Well, I am approaching my 30th year in Tokyo, and I have fashioned a rather odd career because I'm a university teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, but it took me years to realize that really my only talent in life was explaining things. So pretty much everything I do is just explaining things. And that's what I do through my own company and through my universities.
Excellent. Do people ask you to explain things all the time that are outside of your expertise? Or do they say you're such a great explainer, they start asking you about random things like nuclear physics and whatnot?
I'm often amazed by how many people ask me questions, expecting me to know something about it. I don't know if I look smarter than I am, but I quite often get that, people coming to me for explanations.
They hear the word professor and they say, oh, you're an encyclopedia then.
That's right.
Well, thank you for being here, Ruskyle. And I'd like to ask, how are you using virtual teaching and online learning, especially this year when so many of us have been forced to do that?
Yeah. Well, like everyone else, I was just thrown into this with very little preparation or warning. And there was a bit of a scramble at first. I avoid most of the technology, frankly, that a lot of other people are using, because I really am trying to keep it simple. I know a lot of people who are using all kinds of different tech tips and tools to make their lessons interactive and do quizzes and all of this. And I don't really understand how that is supposed to help the students. So I pretty much limit myself to just a few things. I give the students some kind of a pre-class reading task, kind of to prepare them for it. I prepare a short video, usually anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, explaining the key concepts. And I have it set up so I'm sitting on one side of the screen, and up on the other side here is the text, like a PowerPoint. And it seems to work really well because it forces me to be much more thoughtful and deliberate in how I explain things. So I'm finding that my explanations on the videos are actually far better than the explanations I think that I've done live. So I do that. I have them watch the video at the beginning of class, and then we usually come into Zoom, although one class uses WebEx. And I try to use the Zoom session for questions, of course, for practice, and for just kind of getting to know each other. I feel so sorry for the freshman students this year at the university, because they're getting all of the worst parts of university, the homework and the tests and all that, and they're not getting any of the social part, which I think is really so important for them. So I try to always build in some time for the students just to get to know each other and to chat. And at the end of class, there's always some kind of post-class task, although I try to keep them fairly simple and short. My students right now are just buried in homework from all of their classes because some of the teachers seem to think they have to double up the homework to make up for the online portion being less. So I'm trying to be kind to them and only focus on the key things that they need to know. But, after 30 years of teaching, I really do find that less is more, not only online, but also when you're dealing with the live classes. Because if you can really get across one key point in each class, I think you're doing pretty well. So that's my basic setup, is online, pre-class, video, online practice, and then some kind of post-class task. I know there are a lot of other things that you can use, but I just really want to keep it simple for myself and for the students.
When you said that you don't like to use a lot of extra things, I immediately thought if we're going to bring something in, whether it's a website or some other app, does it really serve a purpose? But also, how easy is it to use, especially if it's the first time?
Yeah.
So, have you heard any feedback from students in other classes or other programs that do have to use a lot of maybe new technologies or new apps? And do they find it overwhelming? Have you received any, I guess, feedback for comparison?
Well, there's an online teaching group on Facebook that I'm in, and it's just full of horror stories of students being unable to operate the software, or software going down in the middle of the class. And that's been enough to scare me away from a lot of these technical solutions. But more than anything, I just think teaching at its heart is a pretty simple thing, and it just doesn't need all of that. If you can connect with the student, communicate the key concepts and principles and procedures in a way that they hear, understand, and remember, then you've done your job. You really don't need all the technical stuff. If anything, I think it just distracts from the real teaching that goes on in class.
Makes sense. So I'd like to dive a little deeper into this transition, because all of us, including you, were used to doing things face to face, and then now we're doing almost everything virtually.
Yeah.
Could you give us an example of something you've done that to take yourself from physical to virtual?
Well, the first step was panicking. And I really did not have high hopes at all for this. I thought it was going to be a disaster. I've actually been pleasantly surprised by what I find to be some of the advantages of teaching online. Now, I still think live classes are better. I think the personal component is so important, not only for the students, socially, but for the teacher as well. I just cannot connect as well with the students, of course, online as I can in person. When I teach, I like to get out and I walk around the class the whole time. And I just chat with the students, and that's when they can ask me a question, or I can, give them something just to make sure they understand it. And it's just really hard to do when you're fumbling through breakout rooms and trying to deal with, 30 little pictures on a screen. It just takes away from that personal component that I really do think is so important. However, it also eliminates a lot of the distractions. And you don't have the kids sitting out there with their friend on one side of them making jokes and a cute girl on the other side of them. Their attention is much more focused on, I think, on the class and on the teacher. And partly, I think they're just so bored at home that this is something to do that's more interesting than watching TV. So in that sense, I think it's been an improvement in some areas. However, it's so much more work for the teacher doing it this way. I've got about 400 students that I'm getting email from, assignments and homework and tests and essays and reports. And it's been overwhelming just trying to keep up with it. So far, I'm halfway through the term and I'm not falling behind yet, but I'm spending a lot more time preparing and handling all the paperwork and tests and all that. However, I'm also able to sleep an hour later in the morning, and I'm not having to get on the crowded Tokyo trains every morning for an hour, which is a huge, huge stress relief. That was always the hardest part of my day, which is getting to the school on the Tokyo trains.
Were you on the lines where I've seen videos online where they're physically pushing people into the train to pack them all in?
Oh, not at all. Everybody packs themselves into the train here. We don't need help. No, those are some of the worst ones, but I've been in situations where, I'm a big guy. I'm 183 centimeters tall, and I'm not slight at all, but I'm sometimes in pain and, find it hard to breathe. It's so crammed. And I just really feel sorry for short people who are at armpit height, because they're sometimes just kind of walled in with bodies all around them. And it's hot, and it's crowded, and it's painful, and just generally very unpleasant. Not a good way to start your day.
Yes. Now, from our conversations previously, you said you have a mix of how you do virtual teaching. You say sometimes it's video based, but sometimes it's live.
Mhm.
How do you find both of those? If you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
If you're asking which one is the most effective way to communicate information, it's the video. If you're asking which one is the best way to build the connection with the students and motivate them, it's the live. So I try to do a combination of the two. I really don't try to, or don't want to do anything for more than about 10 minutes at a time, just because even interesting things get boring after a while. So I try to always keep mixing it up. I try to, where they do a video and then we speak as a group, and then I put them in breakout with pairs to practice, then bring them back in, and then put them in a group of 4 to discuss the questions in the textbook. And I try to keep it changing. There's a brilliant book called Brain Rules by John Medina, I believe it is. And he points out that most people have an attention span of about 10 minutes. And after that, no matter what you're doing, no matter how interesting it is, our attention starts to drop off. I mean, if you look at movies and music, the key to those is always dynamic change. If one scene drags on for too long, it gets boring. So that's the approach I try to take with my classes. It's just always keep it changing, changing, changing. And I really want the time to fly by.
That's really good to hear. And we know that with online learners, with the ability to multitask, to check their phone, to check their social media, checking in with them even more than 10 minutes at a time is often a best practice.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Well, and I call on them often individually, so it keeps them on their toes, because they never know who I'm looking at on Zoom.
That's an excellent trick. Now, you said that you're on one side of the screen and you have some images on the other. What technology or platform are you using to do that?
I'm using primarily Zoom. One of my universities requires us to use WebEx, which I find not as functional.
I totally agree.
As of the week after next, they're going to allow us to go to live classes on Zoom. Until now, that school has been entirely asynchronous. So just videos and assignments. They were scared off by the security side of Zoom, but I think that's pretty much been overblown. I don't know any of my colleagues who have had any kind of Zoom bombing or problems like that in their classes. I don't know why anyone would want to Zoom bomb my class. It's not that interesting. So
well, you brought up a good point with Zoom. They had some security issues in the news because Zoom was blowing up, but now they've gone and fixed all of that with the 5.0 release. But almost every other platform has had security issues in the last year or two. That Zoom bombing, even if it occurs on WebEx, can absolutely still happen the same way. Somebody gives out the meeting information. It's not something particular to one platform.
Yeah.
So when you're using Zoom to display images, are you using screen share? Are you using virtual backgrounds? What are you doing to put up the content?
For the videos, I use the equivalent of a virtual background. I use OBS Studio, which is a free video studio platform. And that allows me to put up the text on the wall behind me, basically. It's a PowerPoint that I can click through. So my image is on one side of the screen and the text is over my shoulder. In class, I sometimes use virtual background. I just prepare the same kind of slide, but as a JPEG, and then just flick through them in the virtual background box. And again, it puts the text over my shoulder here. I find in many ways that is far superior to using PowerPoint in class, because it is so close to my head here. It's not like they're going back and forth from me to the PowerPoint screen. And it allows, I think, a little more immediacy. It allows them to stay more focused on me as they're seeing it. But as I said, it forces me also to be more disciplined and more focused in my explanations.
It's really good to hear, whether it's OBS or using the virtual backgrounds, because we know, especially if it's Zoom, if you share your screen and you share an actual PowerPoint slide from your computer desktop, it's going to make your face a small thumbnail.
Yeah.
Unless someone's using dual monitors and they have that set up to allow the two windows. But
Right.
for most people, you become a thumbnail, and then that eye contact, that human connection,
Yeah.
is really reduced, physically reduced on the screen.
Yeah. About the only time I use screen share is to show videos. I'm doing some presentation classes, which is interesting this way. But I'm able to show them videos of people like Steve Jobs and Barack Obama to demonstrate certain points. But again, I keep those pretty short, and then I go back to me. And also, when I'm working with exercises from the textbook for a writing class, I do put it up there. But again, I try to not leave anything up there more than about 5 minutes or so in that case. And even if there are several exercises, I try to pop back into their consciousness in between them, rather than just going directly from one to the next. But
Excellent.
yeah,
Sounds very purposeful.
It's working far better than I expected. It's been kind of a pleasant surprise.
Well, that actually is a great transition to my next question. You said it's been very successful, which is great. What about the obstacles? Do you have any obstacles or things that have happened that you've had to get over or troubleshoot?
Nothing really major. As I said, the main thing is the lack of the personal connection. I did have one girl that I'm pretty sure was crying through the class. And, you know, in a regular class, I could sidle over there and say, you know, are you okay? And is there anything I can do for you? You can't really do that in Zoom very well. I don't know what was going on, but you
could mute her. The most insensitive ignore. That's a really, no, I mean, I'm kind of joking in a way, but that's a very difficult situation if you have somebody in a group class that is, whether it's emotional or some other kind of interference.
Yeah.
How can we manage that while keeping the rest of the class focused?
Yeah. Well, she wasn't making any noise. She was just, I could see the reflection of tears going down her face.
I see.
One other time, just a couple days ago, I called on one girl in class, and she unmuted her microphone. And right at that moment, someone came to the door of the house, rang the bell, and the dog went crazy. And but it was a good laugh for everyone in the class, and I came back to her later.
You know, I on that topic, one of the great things that we're seeing with work at home, learn at home, it's that we're getting an insight into a lot of people's lives that we may not have gotten, and it really can add some humanity to, you know, that whether it's professor student or business person to business person relationship. We get to see people's dogs. We get to sometimes see people's kids. We get to see, you know, what somebody has chosen to bring in for their beverage that day.
Yeah. Well, I read that you should only have a couple cups of coffee a day, so I bought a new cup.
Excellent. So back to the positive side of things. This is the second to last question I have for you today. Do you have any tips, tricks, or recommendations for those of us who are online learning, whether we're teaching or just having virtual meetings?
I would reiterate what I said before. Keep it simple and go in with a plan for what you want them to learn. Don't get too distracted by all the tech stuff. I know there is a lot of really interesting technology out right now that you can use for quizzes and for peer grading and all kinds of things like that. And I'm not opposed to any of it, if you're using it in a thoughtful way for a reason. Do you know the old story about the policeman that's walking down the street and he sees a drunk crawling around on the ground below a streetlight? And the policeman stops and he asks him, can I help you? Is there something wrong? The guy says, I lost my keys. So the policeman gets out his flashlight and they search all around the street lamp and no keys. And finally he asks the guy, he says, well, are you sure you lost them here? And the drunk points down the street and said, no, I lost them down there, but it's too dark to search down there. That's how it feels with a lot of educational technology, as if the technology is driving what you do in the class. I mean, the whole idea with multiple choice tests was never intended to be a way of really evaluating anything but the most simple of tasks. Yet it seems to be the mode of choice for half of the educational tools that I see. I just don't believe in letting the technology tell me how to teach. So I keep it very simple. I have one idea I want to get across at each class, and I try to design around how I can deliver that idea. It's in a sense, it's very similar to what I do with speaking, because a good speaker really goes in with one message they're trying to communicate. And everything is built around that. Everything you do is built around delivering that message. You might have a great story that always gets a lot of laughs, but if it doesn't help you deliver that message, you got to take it out of the speech. So it doesn't matter if it's a great joke or a cool trick or some great technology. If it's not helping you communicate the point you're trying to get across that day, it's just a distraction.
You know,
So,
I hear, oh, sorry. I was going to say, I hear another great takeaway from that story in not letting the technology control you. It's kind of like going back to presentation. Don't let that PowerPoint be your presentation either.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
We're just turning that over to Zoom or whatever platform we're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very true. But I do find Zoom, of all of the different technologies I've used for this stuff, Zoom seems to be the best one, at least the most flexible for training and teaching. Not
especially
perfect.
with those video breakout rooms.
Yeah. I still wish they would enable the virtual background with PowerPoint. That doesn't seem to be happening yet. You can do it with JPEGs, but I don't think you can do it with PowerPoint.
Not with like the PPT file or PPTX.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't found that either. I haven't seen that anywhere. There are a lot of other technologies we can use. You mentioned OBS. There's Prezi Video, but a lot of times at the end of the day, if you have a PowerPoint, you convert it to the JPEGs. The virtual background trick absolutely works.
Yep.
I do wish it was a better layout. I wish the window was bigger where I could see the thumbnails a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if you upload them in order, you can just use that right arrow and it will cycle through them.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, the final question for you today, Ruskyle, is what are your closing thoughts and who should contact you? If anybody's interested in reaching out or networking or learning or doing business, what would you like to say to the world before we leave?
In my 30 years of teaching, and that sounds terrible to say, I know, I have just found that keep it simple is the best advice I can ever take or give. Teaching is about that personal connection. There's that old saying, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. I absolutely find that true, because you can be the most intelligent, well-educated person in the world. But if the people you're trying to train or teach, if you don't have some kind of a personal connection with them, you really can't get across to them what you need to. The connection, and it doesn't have to be a personal connection. I mean, I've learned a lot from Zig Ziglar, and I've never met him, but he still gave across an air of caring about who he was talking to and what he was talking about. It's not about the knowledge. It's about communicating what people need to know in a way that they can understand and remember. And all of the technology, all of the pedagogical methods and formulas, to me, mean nothing if you don't connect with the students. So that's my final thought. And the more I teach, the more I believe that. The people who would contact me are, well, that was bad English. Primarily are two kinds of people. One, I teach a lot of conversational skills. I don't teach grammar, I don't teach vocabulary. I teach people how to have a conversation. Because many, many people, even in their native language, are very poor at conversation. I was, and I think that's why I teach this. But after years of just listening to people and listening to people who were good at conversation and people who were poor at it, I've really broken it down to where I can, in fairly short order, improve people's ability to have a conversation with a stranger or a friend. So that's one of my primary areas that I teach in. And the other is presentation, which in some ways is very similar to what we're doing here. It's about, as you know, I am a Toastmaster, and I have learned most of what I know through Toastmasters. So that's what I'm called to do a lot. I find whenever I get out and do presentations or workshops that I get coaching jobs from that. So I've worked with quite a few very high-level people here in Tokyo. And if they have, especially if they have something they need to speak about, I find that's by far the best way. Training, general training, I find really ineffective. But there's nothing that lights a fire under a student faster than knowing they have to give a big presentation in 2 weeks. And that's when they really pay attention and improve quickly. So those are the two areas that I primarily coach and teach in. My website is RL Howser. That's Howser with a O-W. So RLHOWSER.com. So anybody can get in touch with me there or connect to my blog or any of those things. And I'm always happy to talk to just about anybody about any kind of opportunity. So thank you, Bob, for asking me to do this today. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about these things.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we will put your URL in the video description as well.
That's probably
Thank
easier.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for your time, and I look forward, hopefully, to seeing you again one day in person when this crazy world mess is over.
Yeah, well, you came to visit us in Tokyo, so I'll have to get down to Hong Kong.
Oh, let's do both, because I like
Okay.
both cities.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Excellent. Thank you, Ruskyle.